there's definitely some players there that could jump out to the Bills. And I do think they leave this draft with one of these names we talked about, and think it was definitely worthy of a 5-minute conversation about the safety because they are going to leave with one of those guys. I'm pretty confident of it, whether it's pick 60 or in the 4th round. I don't think it goes later than the 4th round at safety, just like I don't think it does for the receiver position. And it's time to talk about what we both believe to be the Bills' top target, especially after free agency. And the Bills did approach many needs, as you've noted. I still think safety could be just on the same level as receiver based on, especially with adding in future potential of what needed at that position. The Bills don't have receivers like Samuel signed for years. Diggs is signed for multiple years. Shakir has a few more years left on a rookie contract. To me, there's more talent at the receiver room that could be productive than maybe the Bills have at safety. So I do think that they're very similar needs. And Josh Allen today was just recording with Jordan Palmer about his receivers and going through what he's looking for and excited to play with Curtis Samuel. So I'm going to start with you, Kevin. What is your initial reaction? Tell me about, I think, I know some of the initial reactions you have from the receiver room, but there's a top 3 that everybody knows about. Very simply, we can't spend too much time on Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze. Tell us more about behind those 3. What is your opinion on this receiver room?
Well, I think this is a loaded draft, and I don't think as much as we want the Bills to draft a wide receiver in round 1, if they don't, I don't think we necessarily need to panic because some of these guys, as we'll get to, you might be able to get them in round 2 or round 3, and maybe in other years, they would be a higher round 2 pick or even round 1 if you didn't have a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Neighbors or a Dunze. That's just how loaded this class is. Now, one guy outside of that top 3, I see some people talking about him in the comments here, and I think this is a good place to start because I really don't think the Bills are going to get any of those 3 that we mentioned. No, so let's start with Brian Thomas Jr., because I think this is like the prototypical perfect wide receiver 2 for the Bills. But can you get him? Because I think he's probably going to be gone in the top 20.
I would say so. He would definitely be a trade-up target. In how much of these assets that we're talking about would be the Bills' interest to do? And if they can't get him, is there really that much of a gap with some of the other guys that we're going to be talking about? That's the argument. How much of a gap between Brian Thomas as receiver 4 and Ladd McConkey or Worthy or Keon Coleman is there? There's been much debate that there isn't much. So at some point, yes, maybe he is the preferred guy for teams. We don't know that for sure. Everyone could have a preferred, just like a year we saw Jalen Reagor go above Justin Jefferson. Someone's going to have a preferred guy. And I'm not saying, obviously in hindsight, that's a really stupid pick by the Eagles. But look, it's the draft. And to sit there and say on draft night for sure that Justin Jefferson would be better than Jalen Reagor, you don't know that. Maybe you can scouts either way. Philadelphia scouts certainly did not think so. And they still went on to be a really productive team. And still have been a good football team. So they know what they're doing in Philadelphia. So to be said, Brian Thomas Jr. is not the slam dunk receiver 4. The next thing you know, Xavier Worthy goes forth. Or somebody likes something about Ladd McConkey. Or somebody says, you know what, I really like the potential of Keon Coleman. I'm not sure it's a slam dunk at all. But anyways, I definitely don't know that the Bills need to trade assets to get up there either way, whether he is or not. So that's kind of where I stand. If he's there, I think it's a slam dunk pick. But I'm not in the camp to need to panic to get up to 20 because the second tier hasn't started to go off the board yet and have to give up premium assets and basically lock down your draft with just coming out with just that player. I don't know. That's where it's hard for me. So I don't know. What do you think? If you had presented an option to go up to 21 to take Brian Thomas Jr., are you doing it, giving up assets, or are you fine with them all being a similar tier?
Now, I see it both ways because on one side, I think that Brian Thomas Jr. is a great prospect, 6'5", almost 200 pounds, and he went off last year with Neighbors playing on the opposite side of him. And I just think that he is just like that perfect wide receiver 2 that the Bills need. But how about trading back and getting more picks? And then maybe going back to our previous conversation, you find a team where they want to move back up into the first. Someone like Carolina, they don't have a first round pick. You work with them. The Bills have a good relationship with the Panthers. You say, hey, if you want to get in the first round, you can have pick 28. We'll we'll take pick 33, and then obviously they'll figure out some other picks to give the Bills. But maybe the Bills could get Tyler Nubin, and then someone like Xavier Legette is there with their actual second-round pick. So I think there is a lot of moving parts here where the Bills can make it work. But I will say Brandon Beane gets very anxious, and he mentions this a lot. Like, he admits that he has to get held back sometimes. I mean, look, the last 2 years, he traded up for Kyer Elam and Dalton Kincaid. When someone like Elam probably would have been there, he got antsy and he traded up. So I do think that Beane would trade up. Like, if they like Brian Thomas that much, I see Beane trading up. But considering the factors that I laid out, it also might make sense to trade back.
It could. I think that it takes two to tango. There's got to be a player at 28 that someone would want to trade assets for. So you got to go back far enough to make it worth it, right? So if you go to 33, the issue with 33 specifically would be you're getting a 4th-round pick in return. And you're going to lose on the 5th-year option. Do they need to add a 3rd, 4th with all those day 3 picks? I just don't think so. So to make the trade back worth it, you probably need to go a couple of ticks lower than that. So you're probably more looking in the, maybe the 40 range where Washington picks for their second time. You probably have to drop to 40 to get 40 and 67 to kind of more be in range of what you'd be looking to do. And that's still kind of an overpay by Washington. More you'd be looking at Atlanta at 43. That's probably the range. 43 you would get back in a trade back scenario, and 74. So if Atlanta, for some reason, using Atlanta as an example, if Atlanta for some reason wanted to come back up, that's pretty much on par with what it would cost. So you'd have to move to 43. So to trade back, would you be okay going to 43? Because that would net you that 3rd-round pick you're looking for.
Well, the other part of it that I was thinking of was the Bills could trade back and then use that extra ammo to move back up and get their 3rd-round pick back that they don't have anymore. So I think that, again, there are a lot of moving parts here where it wouldn't just be a simple trade back. You would be doing it to not only trade back, but then to trade back up later on in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible if, let's say the Carolina example again, 33 and 101, which is a top pick in the 4th round, you could conceivably make an argument, but the Bills really utilize that 5th-year option to negotiate contracts, whether it was Deion Dawkins. They didn't have one for him, and they probably would have liked one. But what they're going to need to use it with Greg Rousseau. They use it with Ed Oliver. So it's going to be Beane always uses that to get himself a better second contract. So that's where it gets tricky. And they're definitely going to need it on somebody like Dalton Kincaid, for instance. That's going to be a very useful weapon to have in his negotiations in a few years down the road. So is that worth trading to get pick 101? I'm not there with that. But if somebody's desperate, I'm absolutely for trading back. But Brandon Beane gets antsy. He's notoriously said, if Kyer wasn't there, I would have traded back. If Greg Rousseau wasn't there, I would have traded back. Well, if Dalton Kincaid wasn't there, I would have traded back. And at some point, yes, the exception is interesting. I don't know that he has shown he could do it. He hasn't shown any interest in wanting to trade back, and he is into adding the best premium asset that he can add in this draft. So trading back makes sense, and then you could kind of combo it, but I do think you would have to move back a little bit further because you wouldn't be guaranteed, even if you got that 4th-round pick, to be able to come back up into a equitable range that would make sense for the Bills. So we're talking about receiver still. We talked a little bit about Brian Thomas to kind of wrap him up as one of the best tier 2 players that would be on the board. Interesting player. He's smooth. I mean, he makes really good long strides and gets to his top speed because he's pretty good vertically. He's a willing blocker, which the Bills would be looking for. He definitely improved that footwork and release that he needed to fix in 2023. He doesn't have a lot of. We talk about this press thing, right? Doesn't have a lot of experience with what he saw in LSU. Everybody likes to knock Gabe Davis for that catch percentage, and that's definitely one that wasn't great. 2023 was better. I don't seem to care about, but didn't care about it for Gabe either, is that catch number, but it is something where he doesn't come down with a lot of his targets. And he's definitely not a rat guy. He does not make you miss after the catch. So that is definitely one of his biggest things. And that's one of the biggest things the Bills talk about. So I don't know that I love the player. I can connect the dots with, on his scouting report, not being a quote unquote make you miss player. So definitely will be a top 40 pick, but will he be the 4th receiver? It's an interesting conundrum as a team like the Bills really harp on Rack, or are they fulfilled with Rack with Curtis Samuel? That will be what we'll have to see. And can a team truly unlock the kind of threat that he is going forward? So he'll be an interesting key to the puzzle. I'm not sure he's going to be the Bills' number one target, but could be wrong. I don't think they'll trade out for him though.